When I saw our family photos flicker across the TV, followed by messages I wasn't meant to read, something inside me cracked. My husband's secrets weren't hidden anymore. They were plain for everyone to see. It all began that Sunday evening, the kind of quiet Sunday that feels too calm, like the house itself is holding its breath. I was in the kitchen, scraping the remnants of roasted chicken into the compost, while the smell of thyme and butter still clung stubbornly to the air. My husband, Mark, was adjusting the smart TV in the living room, trying to sync it with his phone so he could cast a slideshow of old vacation pictures. I remember thinking it was a sweet idea at first. Mark always had this obsessive attention to detail, the way he wanted everything perfect for the kids. "Almost done, honey," he called over his shoulder. "Just need to connect the phone and you'll see our European trip in full glory." I hummed an acknowledgement, wiping my hands on a dish towel. There was laughter from the kids, Mia and Lucas chasing each other down the hallway. The clatter of dishes and the faint aroma of chocolate chip cookies cooling on the counter mingled with the evening's golden light. I thought everything was ordinary, safe. We sat down for dinner around 6:30. The table was set with mismatched china, something I'd inherited from my grandmother, and a small vase of daisies from the garden. Mark was humming softly while carving the chicken, occasionally stealing bites with the same crooked smile that had first drawn me to him 22 years ago. "Okay, let's see those photos," Lucas said, reaching for the remote. He was only 12, already tall for his age, and impossibly curious. "I want to see the gondolas." Mark topped a few buttons and the TV screen lit up. At first it was all normal. Venice, the Rialto Bridge, the soft ripple of water, our faces smiling awkwardly at the camera. But then, the images shifted, replaced by lines of text. Messages. Names I didn't recognize. Snippets of conversations that were clearly private. At first I laughed nervously, thinking it was some weird glitch. "Mark, is this part of the slideshow?" My voice carried a playful edge, but inside, something cold settled in my chest. He froze, hand hovering over the remote, eyes narrowing. What the? But it was too late. One by one, the messages scrolled, as if the TV itself had decided to betray him. I read words that made my stomach drop. Appointments, secret dinners, veiled apologies, even references to money transfers. The kind of messages someone only sends when they don't want their spouse to see. Lucas leaned forward. "Mom, what's that?" His innocent curiosity was like a dagger in my chest. I couldn't answer. My hands shook slightly, and the sound of the ticking clock in the hallway felt deafening. Mia, on the other hand, simply tilted her head, a frown creasing her forehead. "Dad, who are these people?" Mark's voice was low, clipped. It's nothing, just work stuff. Don't worry about it." But the messages kept coming, flashing across the screen for all of us to see. The words, "I'll take care of it," and "no one can know," and even "when she's gone, we'll finalize everything," stared at me like accusations. I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending I needed water, but my knees felt like lead. I leaned against the counter, trying to breathe, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant laughter of my children. I could hear Mark muttering something to himself, but I couldn't focus on it. My mind was replaying every interaction, every little lie I might have overlooked. Before that night, life had seemed normal, routine, comfortable, perhaps even perfect in the small, mundane way it usually is. Mark had always been attentive, never cruel, and certainly never unfaithful, or so I thought. He cooked breakfast on Saturdays, helped Mia with her violin, played catch with Lucas in the backyard. We argued occasionally, sure, but who doesn't? Nothing had ever hinted at the kind of duplicity now flashing across my living room wall. Our marriage was quiet, safe, predictable. I had thought that was enough. That security, the sense that we were a team, that we were building a life together. Wasn't that what everyone wanted? Yet here it was, crumbling in an instant, with the glow of the TV casting harsh light on truths I wasn't ready to face. The first clue that something was off had actually appeared a few months earlier. I had noticed Mark coming home later than usual, claiming extra meetings or extended travel for important clients. The tone in his voice was always calm, reassuring, but I noticed the small things. The lingering scent of cologne that wasn't mine, the faint crinkle of paper receipts he'd forget on the kitchen counter. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was imagining things. Trust is supposed to be quiet, I reminded myself. Trust doesn't nag at you in whispers at midnight. But now, there was no dismissing it, no pretending. Each message, each line, each carefully typed word was an unvarnished mirror reflecting a truth I wasn't ready to face. I could feel my chest tighten, my hands clammy as I gripped the edge of the counter. The sound of Mark's attempts at casual conversation faded into background noise, meaningless. I remember the first time I confronted him, not verbally, just a look, heavy and accusatory, like the air itself had thickened around us. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw panic, then guilt, then resignation. That fleeting glimpse told me everything I needed to know. He had been hiding, and I had been blind. But the children were still there, laughing, unaware of the storm. That's what made it worse. The way innocence continues as betrayal settles like a shadow in a home. The smell of burnt toast from our rushed breakfast the next morning, the sunlight touching dust motes in the living room, the soft purr of the dog under the table, all of it, ordinary life, now felt painfully fragile. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me, and sank on the bed. I clutched the sheets and tried to imagine a life before the secrets, before the messages. My mind spun with questions. Why? How long? Was it just one mistake? Or had he built an entire life in the shadows while I was folding laundry, paying bills, loving him unquestioningly? And as I sat there, listening to the muffled voices from the living room, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Nothing would ever be the same. The next few days were a strange kind of nightmare disguised as normalcy. I went through the motions, making breakfast, driving the kids to school, answering emails, but everything felt sharper, louder, heavier. Every glance at Mark's face, every casual remark he made was loaded with something I couldn't name. It was like walking around in a house where the furniture had quietly rearranged itself while you weren't looking. You recognize it, but it's unfamiliar, almost threatening. Mark tried to act as if nothing had happened, but I noticed the little cracks almost immediately. The way he kept checking his phone under the table, the subtle tensing of his shoulders whenever I entered the room, even the way he lingered a second too long in front of the mirror. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers, but I held back. Part of me was still hoping this was some absurd, fixable mistake, some miscommunication I could brush away. Then came the first clue. It was a Thursday evening, and we were preparing for dinner in our usual, rushed, slightly chaotic way. I was chopping onions, the tears stinging my eyes, while Mark stirred pasta sauce on the stove. The kids were fighting over the TV remote, and the dog was pawing at Lucas for attention. I was about to call out for them to settle down when I noticed a small envelope tucked under Mark's laptop on the kitchen counter. I had never seen it before. It was plain, unmarked, except for my husband's handwriting scrawled neatly on the front, "For your eyes only." Something in my chest tightened. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The paper felt thick, heavy, significant. I debated tossing it aside, pretending I hadn't seen it, but curiosity was stronger than caution. I opened it. Inside was a series of receipts, all dated in the past few months, for dinners at restaurants I had never heard of, hotel stays in nearby cities, and even what looked like payments to accounts I couldn't place. Each one was neatly folded, carefully documented, almost obsessive in its secrecy. I swallowed hard. "Mark, what is this?" My voice was quieter than I intended, but the tension made it brittle, sharp. He froze, a spoon hovering over the sauce, and didn't meet my eyes. It's nothing. Just work expenses." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to lean in and accept the explanation, to tell myself that maybe I had overreacted. But the unease that had been growing since the TV incident flared into something hotter, something urgent. My gut was screaming that these weren't work dinners. These weren't hotel stays for conferences. "Mark," I said again, firmer this time, "what are you hiding from me?" He finally looked at me, and I saw the truth in his eyes. Fear. Guilt. A flicker of shame. But he didn't answer. He just nodded slightly and went back to stirring the sauce, as if ignoring me could erase the evidence before my mind pieced it together. That night, after the kids were asleep, I stayed awake in bed, turning the envelope around in my hands, my mind spinning. I replayed our marriage in fragments, weekend getaways that seemed overly planned, last-minute business trips, the late nights at the office he claimed were unavoidable. I remembered the vague sense of distance creeping in, small but persistent, like a crack in plaster that widens silently over time. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the TV incident had skewed my perception. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining anything. There was a pattern here, something deliberate. Over the next week, the tension in the house became palpable. Mark's behavior grew stranger. He was distant, distracted, and defensive over the smallest things. If I mentioned his phone, he would clench his jaw, glance away, or make some lame excuse. I started noticing things I had never questioned before: a new password on his computer, the way he always cleared the browser history before I could see it, the slight panic in his eyes when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. One evening, I found myself standing in the hallway pretending to check the laundry while listening to him talking on the phone in the living room. He spoke in hushed tones, almost reverently, to someone whose voice I couldn't hear. "I'll handle it tonight. She doesn't need to know anything yet. Everything's under control." My stomach dropped. That voice, calm and casual, was the same one I loved, trusted, married, and yet in that moment, it felt like a stranger was speaking. I tried to push the fear aside. I wanted to confront him immediately, to demand the answers, but I realized I didn't have the full picture. I needed evidence, something concrete, undeniable. The TV incident had shown me that Mark's phone held the answers, and so, every evening, I found myself lingering near the living room, casually reaching for the remote under the guise of adjusting the volume, hoping the phone would sync again. A week later, the opportunity came. We were having a casual family movie night. Lucas had chosen an animated film, Mia a rom-com, and Mark, always wanting to please everyone, was fiddling with the TV, connecting his phone again to stream the trailers. I watched his fingers tap the screen, the reflection of the TV casting a soft glow on his face. And then it happened. Just like before, the screen flickered, the movie paused, and messages began to scroll. Only this time, I wasn't caught off guard. I was ready. The messages were worse than I had imagined. Names I didn't recognize, phrases that implied deception, dates and plans that excluded me entirely. And then my heart stopped. One message, simple and cold, made everything real. "She trusts me completely. Soon she won't even know the house is gone." I froze, the remote slipping from my hand. The words burned themselves into my mind. My house, my home, my sanctuary, the place where my children laughed, where we celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, gone. Sold. Without my knowledge. I felt a wave of nausea, a tremor of disbelief. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Mark, realizing what was happening, tried to grab the remote, stammering excuses, but I had already seen enough. Every doubt, every suspicion, every late-night whisper in my gut had been vindicated. And in that moment, I realized that the life I thought I knew, the marriage I had trusted, the family I had nurtured, was unraveling in front of my eyes, one flickering message at a time. The following morning, the house felt heavier than usual. Even the sunlight streaming through the blinds seemed sharper, harsher, casting long shadows that reminded me of the secrets now hovering over us. I barely slept, my mind racing through every message, every hidden dinner, every transaction. I kept replaying the words on the TV screen. She trusts me completely. Soon she won't even know the house is gone. I needed to see the truth for myself. I couldn't rely on glimpses or guesses anymore. I went into the living room while Mark was in the shower. The TV still displayed the synced phone screen, a quiet invitation I wasn't sure I wanted to accept, but I couldn't stop myself. There it was. Everything. Every message, every plan, every lie, neatly timestamped. The names, people I didn't recognize, but clearly part of his secret life. And then the most devastating revelation. Official-looking documents, scanned and uploaded, showing the house had indeed been sold while I was away at a routine doctor's appointment last month. I sat down on the couch, numb. My hands trembled, gripping the edge of the cushion as if holding on to it could somehow tether me to reality. I could hear the soft trickle of water from the shower, the mundane sounds of our home continuing as if nothing had happened, and it made the betrayal feel even colder. When Mark emerged, wrapped in a towel, he froze. His eyes met mine, and I saw panic, a flicker of shame, then something worse, the resigned knowledge that the truth could no longer be hidden. "Mark, you sold it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth, like admitting a death in the family. He swallowed hard. I can explain." "No," I interrupted, my voice gaining strength from the shock and hurt pooling inside me. "There's nothing to explain. I saw the messages. I saw the documents. You lied to me. You lied to all of us." He stepped closer, his hand outstretched, trembling slightly. I thought I was protecting us. "You were stressed, busy. I didn't want you to worry." "Protecting us?" I repeated incredulously, the words tasting bitter. "You sold our home without even telling me. The kids, the memories, everything we built. Gone. And for what?" He faltered. I needed the money. The investment fell through. I didn't know how to tell you." Tears burned my eyes. I had trusted him, loved him, built a life around the belief that we were partners. And now, in a few short lines of text and scanned documents, I realized how fragile that belief had been. I stood, shaking, pacing the living room, trying to make sense of it all. Every familiar corner, every family photo, every cushion on the couch seemed to mock me with what had been stolen. "Do you even understand what you've done, Mark?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Our home isn't just a building, Mark. It's our life. How could you make decisions like this behind my back, without me?" He didn't answer, just hung his head. Silence filled the room like a physical weight, pressing down, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to wake the children and tell them what their father had done, but I couldn't. The betrayal was too vast, too raw, too overwhelming. Instead, I turned to the TV. The messages were still there, scrolling quietly across the screen, cold and unfeeling. And then I noticed something else. A calendar invitation for a meeting at a bank dated the same day the sale went through. My stomach sank. He hadn't just sold the house, he had planned it meticulously, ensuring every detail was hidden, every trace of accountability erased. I felt a wave of nausea. I sat down again, burying my face in my hands. I could hear his shallow breathing behind me, hesitant, regretful, but it didn't comfort me. Nothing could. Finally, I stood, my body shaking with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I knew I had to confront him fully, not just about the house, but about everything. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady now, firm. "I want every detail. Who knew, who helped, why. Everything." He nodded silently, the shame in his eyes now unmasked. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll tell you everything. I'm so sorry." For hours he spoke, every detail, every secret, every lie, laid bare. There were explanations, weak justifications, desperate pleas, but the pain in my chest didn't ease. The reality of his double life, the deliberate planning, the secrecy, it all cut deeper than I could have imagined. By the time he finished, the children were asleep, and the house felt hollow, echoing with the absence of trust. I didn't know if I could forgive him or if our life could ever be rebuilt from the rubble of deceit. I wandered to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The world outside seemed absurdly ordinary. The neighbors mowing lawns, walking dogs, completely unaware of the chaos within our home. And yet that ordinary life was what made the betrayal hurt more. He had taken something sacred and turned it into a lie. For the first time, I realized that love alone wasn't enough to protect us. Trust had to be earned, nurtured, defended. And in that moment, I felt both the weight and the freedom of that realization. The house was gone. The life we had envisioned together shattered. But the children were still here, and somehow I had to find a way forward. Not just for myself, but for them. The next morning, the house felt like a war zone, though nothing outside had changed. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Ordinary smells that now felt foreign and even mocking. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope of receipts and documents that had started this unraveling. My hands gripped the edges until my knuckles whitened. Mark came in, holding his mug like a lifeline. I can fix this," he said, voice low, careful. I didn't answer. "Fix this? How do you fix a life that's been dismantled in secret, piece by piece?" My chest tightened, a sharp ache radiating into my shoulders. I realized that whatever he said or did now would never erase the betrayal. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. If I reacted with uncontrolled anger, it would give him power over me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I needed a plan. First, I needed clarity. "Mark," I said finally, my voice measured, "I need access to everything. All your accounts, your emails, your messages. No exceptions." His face went pale. I don't know if that's necessary. Can't we just—" "No," I interrupted, sharper than I intended. "Necessary or not, I need the truth. If I'm going to figure out the next step, I have to see it all." He nodded reluctantly, a defeated slump to his shoulders. Over the next hour, I went through everything. Bank statements, text logs, emails, online accounts. Each click of the mouse, each folder I opened felt like digging into a wound that refused to heal. But I couldn't stop. I had to know the full extent. The evidence was worse than I'd feared. There were payments, meetings, even contracts with people I had never heard of. And then I found it. A separate bank account, one that he had been funding for months, quietly diverting money from joint accounts, saving for a life he had built without me. My stomach churned. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was practical, logistical. He had been planning a life that excluded me entirely. I didn't panic. Not outwardly. I learned something in all those years of motherhood. Panic helps no one. Instead, I started documenting everything, creating a timeline of events, screenshots of messages, bank statements, and contracts. I wanted clarity. I wanted control. When Mark tried to interrupt, I held up a hand. "Not now," I said. "This isn't about you defending yourself. This is about me understanding the truth. And when I'm done, I'll decide what comes next." I spent the day like that, alternating between quiet calculation and moments of bitter reflection. At night, I confronted him again, not screaming, not pleading, but calmly, with the full weight of evidence behind me. "You lied," I said. "Every detail, every choice, every plan." "Why?" "I thought I was helping," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "I thought I could handle it without hurting you." I shook my head, exhaling slowly. "Helping? You sold our home. You built a secret life. That's not helping, it's stealing. And I won't let it continue." He looked down at the floor, silent. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't expected: clarity. The power I thought he held, control over our home, over our life, wasn't real. It had always been mine. I just needed to reclaim it. Over the next week, I took steps quietly, methodically. I spoke to the bank about reversing or at least pausing any transactions that could still be halted. I consulted a lawyer about the sale and our rights, preparing myself for confrontation with proof rather than emotion alone. Every call, every email, every meeting reminded me that control was a choice, and I was choosing to take it back. The hardest part wasn't the financial planning. It was facing the emotional wreckage. Mark tried to apologize at every turn, but I learned early on that words mean little without accountability. So I set boundaries. No solo phone calls, no excuses, and most importantly, no unilateral decisions. One evening, as the kids were finishing homework at the kitchen table, Mark tried to intervene, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry. Please, just trust me again." I looked at him, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of all those years, all the shared memories, the quiet life we had built. But I couldn't ignore the betrayal. I said nothing, just continued typing, documenting, and preparing. My silence spoke louder than any apology could. I realized that my reaction wasn't about revenge, it was about self-preservation, about protecting my kids, about ensuring that our home, our lives, and our memories weren't completely erased. I wasn't plotting vindictive payback. I was reclaiming what he had tried to steal. And slowly, methodically, I began to rebuild a sense of safety inside the house. Small things like reestablishing routines with the kids, making sure the bills were paid, locking away important documents, and ensuring he couldn't make another secret move without my knowledge. I even started sleeping in my own bedroom again, a small but symbolic reclaiming of my personal space. Mark followed, cautiously, like a man navigating a minefield he had built himself. Every step he took was careful, tentative, guilt-laden. I didn't celebrate his fear, nor did I exploit it. I simply held the line, letting him understand that trust had to be earned, not assumed. By the end of the week, I felt a fragile sense of empowerment return. The betrayal had shaken me to the core, yes, but it had also reminded me of something crucial: my own strength. I was capable of facing the worst, standing my ground, protecting my family, and demanding accountability. And that knowledge, that clarity, gave me something he could never take away. It didn't take long for the truth to ripple beyond the walls of our home. Mark's actions had consequences that could not remain hidden forever, and I realized that hiding now would only prolong the damage. With my documentation in hand, I scheduled a meeting with our real estate agent, our lawyer, and eventually our family. I needed the story to be told clearly, objectively, without distortion, so that no one could excuse what had been done. The first confrontation outside the house was with the agent. We sat in the small office, the sunlight catching dust in the air, the faint smell of stale coffee hanging around. I laid out the timeline, the messages, the contracts. The agent listened, eyebrows furrowed, flipping through the documents I handed over. "This is serious," she said, finally, her voice low. "Had you not brought this to our attention, the sale would have gone through entirely. You did the right thing." It was a small reassurance, but it mattered. It reminded me that the world outside the betrayal could still be just, and that people, when presented with the facts, often do the right thing. Next, I called a family meeting. My parents, my siblings, even a few close friends joined, their faces masks of concern and disbelief. Mark sat silently, hands folded, while I told the story, step by step. Every secret dinner, every hidden transaction, every deceptive message. Every pause was met with gasps or silence, the weight of truth settling in like a storm. My parents were the hardest to face. Their expressions shifted between sorrow, anger, and disbelief. I could feel their disappointment radiating like heat, heavy and pressing. And yet I noticed something else, a deep, underlying relief. The relief of knowing that I was no longer alone in this, that my family could see and understand what I had endured. When I finished, Mark tried to explain, to plead, but the words fell flat. The room was thick with tension, and for the first time, he faced the full social consequence of his actions. Our friends, our family, people who he had trusted, were now witnesses to the depth of his betrayal, and he had no defense strong enough to shield him. Mia and Lucas were curious, of course, but I shielded them from the worst details. I told them that some grown-ups make mistakes, that we were handling it, and that they would be safe. Their innocent questions were sharp reminders of what was at stake. Not just my feelings, but the lives and hearts of the children. Even Mark's closest friends began to distance themselves subtly, unsure of how to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the person who had orchestrated a secret life behind his family's back. Word travels fast in small circles, and the reality of his duplicity became public knowledge within our community. The social consequences, while not cruel or vengeful, were real and palpable. I noticed the shift almost immediately. Invitations stopped arriving. Casual lunch meetings disappeared. People who had once relied on him for advice now hesitated before speaking, unsure if trust could ever be restored. And through it all, I remained composed, calm, a silent witness to the unraveling that had once been hidden from me. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about justice, accountability, and the moral balance of the situation. Mark faced consequences not as punishment, but as the natural result of his choices. The world responds to deceit, especially when it threatens the foundation of trust within a family. At home, I continued to rebuild. We had to renegotiate living arrangements, secure finances, and repair the fragile sense of normalcy for the children. Each day was a careful balance, enforcing boundaries with Mark, shielding the kids, and reconnecting with the friends and family whose trust I had maintained. I began to notice something profound during this period. While the social consequences were real and necessary, the act of standing film, documenting everything, and facing the truth publicly had given me a sense of control I hadn't realized I'd lost. I wasn't acting out of spite or revenge. I was acting out of preservation, courage, and moral clarity. Even Mark began to change slightly under the scrutiny, not entirely and certainly not fully, but there was a tangible weight to his behavior, a recognition that his choices had consequences beyond our living room, beyond our family, beyond his own conscience. He began attending therapy, sought financial advice, and tried, cautiously, awkwardly, to make small reparations where possible. I didn't celebrate these attempts. I didn't allow them to undo the damage, but I acknowledged them privately, a quiet recognition that accountability can, in rare instances, lead to growth. I also realized something else. The truth, once revealed, has a strange kind of liberating power. For weeks, I had carried the weight of suspicion, betrayal, and fear. Once it became public, once the social consequences set in, I no longer had to carry that alone. The burden lifted in small increments because the world now saw the truth and recognized my stance. There were moments of discomfort, of tension, yes. Family gatherings were strained, conversations with old friends felt awkward, but there was also a new layer of respect, an acknowledgement that I had faced what many would run from, that I had preserved myself and the children without sacrificing my integrity. And slowly, I began to notice the first signs of real healing. People reached out, cautiously at first, to offer support, reassurance, or just an understanding ear. The community, once oblivious, now became a source of validation and strength. And within that, I found a strange but welcome sense of closure, not of revenge, not of schadenfreude, but of moral and emotional equilibrium. I realized in those quiet moments that public consequences serve a vital purpose. They're not meant to humiliate, but to restore balance, to show that deceit cannot thrive unchecked, and that accountability, though painful, is necessary for any chance at rebuilding. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. Not the old rhythm, I knew that could never return, but a different, steadier one rooted in honesty, boundaries, and careful rebuilding. I took control of our home again, not just physically but emotionally. The house, though smaller now, felt safe. I chose where the furniture went, painted a wall that Mark had long wanted untouched, and hung new photographs. Snapshots of laughter, of children at play, reminders that life still had light in it. Each small act was a declaration. The past had been broken, but the present could still be shaped. Mark's presence became measured. He no longer acted as if the world would bend around him. He participated in family life cautiously, silently aware that trust had to be earned, not assumed. I listened, I observed, and I gave him tasks, concrete responsibilities he could complete to show accountability rather than vague promises. Therapy became part of our lives, for him, and eventually for me too. I had underestimated how much the betrayal had shaken my own sense of self. Sitting with a counselor, talking through the pain, the shock, the anger, allowed me to recognize that healing wasn't linear. Some days were calm, others were raw, the wound reopening at unexpected moments. But gradually, I began to feel a sense of clarity I hadn't known in months. The children, remarkably resilient, adapted faster than I did. Mia took comfort in routines, bedtime stories, piano practice, soccer games. Lucas, curious and perceptive, asked questions, but I answered with care, honesty, and reassurance. I realized that protecting them wasn't about shielding them from the truth entirely, but about showing them how to navigate it with integrity. One evening, as I tucked Lucas into bed, he looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mom, will Dad ever lie to us again?" I paused, thinking carefully. "I hope not, sweetheart. And we're all going to do our best to make sure that never happens. But sometimes people make mistakes, and it's up to us to learn from them and make better choices." He nodded, curling under the blankets, trusting my words. And in that small trust, I felt a tiny but profound sense of victory, not over Mark, but over the chaos that had threatened to consume us. I also learned the importance of self-care, of nurturing the parts of myself that had been neglected. I started taking walks again, long ones in the late afternoons, breathing in the crisp air, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. I journaled, letting my emotions spill onto the page without fear of judgment. I reconnected with friends who had remained steadfast, people whose loyalty was tested by my silence, and whose support now felt like a balm.
Forgiveness, I discovered, was a process, not a gift to Mark, but a liberation from myself. It didn't mean forgetting, excusing, or returning to the life we had before. It meant releasing the constant grip of anger, allowing myself to exist without being consumed by the past. Some days I felt it fully. Other days, the sting returned. But gradually I realized that forgiving him, in my own way and on my own terms, gave me freedom. Financially, we rebuilt slowly. With the house sale halted and legal measures in place, we managed to reclaim a portion of what had been diverted. We downsized, yes, but we did so with intention and care. Each step was a reminder that while the betrayal had taken much, it could not take my resolve. And then there were moments of grace, quiet ones, almost imperceptible, that reminded me life could still be tender and kind. A shared laugh with Mark over a burnt batch of cookies. Mia performing a violin piece perfectly in her recital, eyes sparkling with pride. Lucas showing me a drawing he made of our home, insisting it was safer now with you in charge. Small threads, weaving a tapestry of healing. I began to reflect often, thinking about the lessons carved into my heart by this betrayal. Trust is fragile, yes, but it can be rebuilt, carefully, with transparency, patience, and boundaries. People are capable of mistakes, and accountability matters more than promises. And above all, strength is not the absence of pain, but the choice to face it and keep moving forward. I also started connecting with other women, quietly sharing my story, not for sympathy, but as a reminder that betrayal is never a reflection of one's worth. I heard stories of similar pain and, in the exchange, found solidarity. It was humbling, heartening, and healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Mark and I didn't return to the marriage we once had. That life had been lost. But a new one emerged, quieter, grounded, conscious. We coexisted now, built on necessity, respect, and the fragile threads of regained trust. It wasn't perfect, but perfection had never been the goal. Survival, integrity, and the safety of our children were enough. Sometimes I still walk past the living room TV, the screen dark, the remote in its place, and I think of that night when everything came to light. I remember the shock, the heartbreak, the anger. And I smile faintly because I survived it. Not unscathed, not untouched, but alive, aware, and stronger than before. Healing, I learned, isn't a grand dramatic gesture. It's quiet. It's the rebuilding of routines, of trust, of self. It's noticing your own breath, the laughter of your children, the feel of sunlight on your face, and allowing life to exist again, even after the storm has passed.
Sometimes the hardest storms in life come from the people we love the most. I never imagined that a simple family dinner, a flicker of a smart TV, could unravel the life I had built with Mark, exposing secrets I wasn't prepared to face. And yet, in that heartbreak, I found clarity. I learned that trust is precious and fragile, that betrayal doesn't just shake the foundation of a home, it shakes the foundation of who you are, who you thought you were, and who you thought you could rely on. And I learned that healing doesn't happen all at once. It's quiet, it's deliberate, and sometimes it's lonely. But it is possible. Life didn't return to the way it was, and I wouldn't want it to. What replaced it is steadier, stronger, grounded in honesty and accountability. I learned to reclaim my voice, my choices, and my power. I learned that forgiveness is not about erasing the past, it's about liberating your own heart from it. And the children, our greatest treasure, taught me more than any betrayal or heartbreak ever could. They reminded me why I had to stand firm, why I had to protect them, and why life, even after such a storm, could still be beautiful. So I ask you gently, from my heart to yours, if you were in my place, what would you have done? How would you have faced the truth, confronted the betrayal, and moved forward? Life will test us all in ways we never expect. But it is in those moments that we find our strength. And perhaps, in the quiet aftermath, our peace. If my story resonates with you, or if you know someone who might need to hear it, please consider subscribing and supporting this channel. Together, we can share these stories, learn from them, and remind one another that even in betrayal, there can be healing, and even in heartbreak, there can be hope.